Hello and welcome back. My name is Dr. Christopher Gennari, and this is Great Big History Podcast. In this episode, we're going to talk about the results of the Wars of Conquest and then the collapse of the Roman Republic, which is a result of the Wars of Conquest. Now, we have to talk about nomenclature, how we name things for a moment. We're going to use empire two ways, little e and big E. Little e empire is the conquest of other peoples and the control over people who are different than you. Big E empire, the Roman Empire, big E, is the Rome run by the Republic, Rome run by an emperor, There's two periods of Roman politics, the Roman Republic and the Roman Empire. In the Roman Republic, Rome is run by the Senate. In the Roman Empire, it's run by an emperor, one guy. The Republic and the Empire have an empire, little e, where they controlled people who were not Roman. That's what we're going to be talking about today, the little e. We're going to talk about the big E in our next episode, but today we're talking about the little e. And the wars of conquest of Carthage, Spain, Greece, Macedon, Ionia, Asia Minor, the Seleucids, led to an empire, the control over vast amounts of people. One world economic political system. All roads lead to Rome. The Romans were in charge of the world. Roman money was the money. The Roman Republic ran and is restored order. You have globalization and order. People stopped fighting each other because Rome told them to stop. Rome is going to build roads that allow the economic unity to flow into Italy and to Rome specifically. Rome becomes a cosmopolitan city, and because Rome owned this world and started tying it together, you get a cosmopolitan world. You get the mass movement of peoples, both willingly and unwillingly. Willingly, people go to Rome to get jobs, to join the army. Unwillingly, massive millions of people, of slaves, of enslaved peoples, are going to be moved from one part of the empire to the other. They are going to share ideas. They are going to share food. They're going to share gods. And that allowed for an advancement because the Romans knew that they were willing to change. They had won the world by changing. They knew the Greeks were smarter than them, so they absorbed Greek culture. They knew the Carthaginians were wealthier than they were and better ocean sailors than they were, so they created a navy and they absorbed the idea of the Carthaginian navy. The Romans changed. And so they kept changing. They were perfectly willing to absorb other people's knowledge if it proved useful. In the end, they'll absorb other people's God. There's also the movement of goods. Italy was now wealthy. I could sell my Spanish oranges in Italy. Mineral wealth, Gallic timber, Germanic timber, amber, all could flow to these other places. You get a world economy, both by the land roads, but also by sea lanes, because the Romans got rid of the pirates. There was nowhere for them to go. By conquering the Mediterranean, pirates had nowhere to go. And so you get the increase in trade and the increase in wealth for more people. Education goes up, law, customs, food, the language. In the West, you have Latin. In the East, you have Greek. And smart people will speak both. All spread, all of these things, education, law, customs, food, music, language, all spread to unite people. And what the small town that we have been talking about in Mesopotamia, the Phoenician cities, the Greek cities isolated in their little mountains, is replaced by a much larger structure, the empire, this diverse world. It's like going from small town Pennsylvania to New York City. It's a radical change. And there hadn't been anything like this. The Assyrians didn't tie people together. They didn't want people tied together because they might unite and rebel against them. The Persians, same thing. Perfectly willing to let everyone be whoever they wanted to be. We see this in the army where people didn't change. The Romans forced people to change. You become Roman if you want to be something in the world. But being Roman changed. Like the Persians don't change. The Persians are not picking up lots of other people's ideas. It's not that they're rejecting them. It's just that they're not absorbing them because the Persians thought they were better than other people. The Greeks do much the same. The Greeks spread Greek culture to other people. They are willing for other people to become Greek. But there's not a whole lot of like, hey, let's all become monotheists like the Hebrews, or let's pick up Indian gods. We're Greeks, and we're awesome. So the small world of the isolated town, of the small city, is replaced by this massive globalized world. But not all Romans are comfortable with the changes, especially plebeians. They're seeing them being replaced. They're seeing them, if I don't have the money to buy Greek tutors, my kids are being left behind. And I don't know how I feel about all these new foods coming in, all these new customs coming in. What are these fruits? What is this meat? What are these? This new architecture, these Greek columns going up. Like, we're Romans. Why are we suddenly building Greek style stuff? Didn't we beat up the Greeks? And there's this uncomfortableness with the changes. The Romans are a conservative people. And so it's not a surprise that the plebeians especially are like, we conquered a world. We beat up other people because we're better than them. Why are we acting like them? Why would we do this? Why do I have to change? I won. And thus, not all Romans win from the increase in knowledge or globalized trade. I now have to compete. If I'm a Roman farmer, I have to compete with Spanish wine, Sicilian wheat, Egyptian wheat, Greek barley, Greek olives. Like, suddenly, how am I going to compete with these things? How am I going to get tutors to teach me or my kids so that they can move up in society? Before, I just had to show up and someone said, hey, we need a volunteer to be an officer. They just needed to be in the army before. And I go, hey, I'll be an officer. And boom, you're an officer. The Roman society was much more egalitarian. It's hierarchical, but it's also your ability to move up in it didn't have so many hurdles. Now all of a sudden it's, if you want a job, you have to have a college degree. You have to have, and where did you get your degree from? Did you have Greek tutors or crappy Spanish tutors? Oh, well, and now who can afford the best Greek tutors? It is the creation of kind of a way of locking out poor people. Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Columbia exist to perpetuate wealth. Why? Because it puts a bunch of rich people together with other rich people to do rich things with those rich people. Look at the Facebook movie. Mark Zuckerberg is like, oh, I started my thing, my Facebook in my dorm room. Yeah? Who invested in Facebook? Other students. Other Harvard alumni. People who he had connections with. So what that does is it locks people out. You don't go to Harvard for the education. My 101 class is awesome. And you're not going to get much more at Harvard. But what you get at Harvard is to rub elbows with a bunch of other rich people and professors who rub elbows with rich people. And you get those connections. What you're paying for, what you're paying $80,000 a year for, isn't the education. It's the connections. And so not all Romans win by globalization. And you get this gulf that opens up between those who could tap into globalization, those who could tap into Greek knowledge, and those who can't. And so this is, in the end, going to bring about the collapse of the Roman Republic. Why? Well, globalization allowed the rich to get super rich, selling they could buy goods from far away, bring them to Rome, and sell them as exotics, sell them at a premium. Spanish mines. They could own a Spanish mine. They didn't have to go to Spain. They could just own the mine. Greek wine, German amber, Egyptian wheat. Someone has to import these things. And so that you could set up a company to import German amber. Also, slaves. If you were a patrician, you had money, you could buy slaves. With the conquest of the Greek world, of Africa, of Spain, you have now massive amounts of slaves, which allows you to buy land in Italy and set up giant plantations, set up giant mines, to set up an economy of scale. Think Walmart, Costco. You're able to sell things cheaper because you're able to make more of it. A typical farm is 25 to 50 acres, depending on how many animals you have to help you. A plantation is 10,000 acres, 5,000 acres, with thousands of slaves on it. How can a local farmer compete with that? The answer is they can't. So you get all, if you're able to invest in the stock market, in these new businesses, you will make a killing, and the rich get super rich. But if you are a regular old farmer, you actually now have competition that you didn't have before. Not only do you have to compete with Italians, but now, how do you compete with the Spanish mines that are overflowing with gold and silver? Greek wine. How? Carpentry and wood from Phoenicia. The cedar trees of Phoenicia are famous. Well, if you're a timber worker in northern Italy, you just lost. Because if I'm a rich patrician, I'm not buying Italian pine, Italian timber. I'm buying Phoenician cedar. It smells better and it's awesome. It's the best, some of the best wood in the ancient world. And then there's Greek knowledge, and we've kind of talked about that. Sophistication, advancement. You get better jobs. You get to rub elbows with smarter people. You get to move up in that society. And so the rich become super rich, and you get increased income inequality. And the plebeians lose out. Yes, goods become cheaper. Woohoo! But cheap labor equals competition. Reconstruction from the destruction of Hannibal. Remember, Hannibal spent 20 years burning down most of Italy, which means when you came back from Zama as a winner, you got a $5,000 check. Congratulations, you won. And then you went home to your burned out house, your burned out farm, your burned out barn. All your pigs have been eaten. All your horses have been stolen. Your fields are fallow and haven't been plowed or used in years. It's going to cost you $100,000 to rebuild. And you've got a $5,000 check. So where are you going to get the money from to rebuild? And why would you rebuild? Here's the other part. Why? Because cheap Sicilian food is coming into Rome. You can't compete with that. They sell it for $10 a sack of grain. It's going to cost you, even without Reconstruction, it cost you $20 before. How do you compete? You can't. So why would I rebuild? And that's when you get to knock on the door from your local patrician's agent, being like, "Sir, I was hired by the local patrician who likes you, who you're friends with. And he feels for you. And he's sorry that your place is so burned out. You are a hero of Rome. You helped defeat Hannibal. We're all better off for that. So he wants to make you a deal. He'll loan you money. You could rebuild. Or he will buy out your farm for the price it was before the war. Now that's a good deal. Because right now your farm is worth nothing. And yeah, I could take a loan out from my local patrician who will help me. Remember we talked about the army? I was fighting with him. I was fighting under him in the army. He's not trying to screw me. We are all in this together. We have all been workers together to defeat Hannibal. So he's not out to screw me. He could, but he's not. Let's just make it that he's a good patrician. He's the rich guy of the neighborhood. He wants to help the poor people coming back. He wants to do that. But why would I rebuild? I can't compete with Sicilian or much less Egyptian. Once Egyptian wheat shows up, forget it. Even the Sicilians can't compete with Egyptian wheat. There's so much of it that it just flows in. The price drops. So I look and go, I can go. Now, he's not going to give me that money. It's going to be a loan. So I could take the loan. I could rebuild. I will then have to make money and repay that loan. But how am I going to make the money? I'm not going to make the money. I'm going to lose money. So what I do is sell out. I sell my farm to the local patrician and I move. I take that money. So he now gives me $50,000, let's say. It's a good price for my farm. So now I have my $5,000 from the war and $50,000 from my farm. And I go to Rome because I'm Roman. So I move to Rome. What the patrician does is buy my farm, my neighbor's farm, lots of other people's farms. And you're like, well, where did he get the money from? He got the money from the conquest of Carthage. As an officer, he got more money. So he didn't get $5,000. He got $100,000. He also has more friends who have more money. His family has more money, so they could rebuild quicker, easier. Money always gives you more money, doesn't save you from problems. It just gives you the cushion to recover from those problems. The poor farmers looked at it and went, well, all right, I'm going to sell out and move to Rome. Whereas the guy now has 100,000 acres. Now, he's not going to plant wheat. That'd be silly. But he's going to do wine or cotton, or he's going to do some good that he can make money selling at the markets that doesn't have a lot of competition from Egypt or Sicily. He's not going to sell food. Food is a bulk good of, you need to sell a lot. It's a low profit good. What these guys are going to do is do high profit goods because they don't have to worry about planting food. They're getting food from Egypt. They're getting food from Sicily. So they're going to do high-end goods. Where are they going to get the labor from? They're going to buy slaves from Africa, from Spain, from Greece. They're going to buy slaves. And those people are going to work. And so you get these massive plantations, thousands of acres, thousands of slaves, where there used to be thousands of small farms. And the result of this is the rich guys get super rich, but the plebeians lose out. And they end up, lots of them become unemployed on welfare in Rome. They're unemployed ex-soldiers on welfare. Now, why would they be on welfare? Well, because Rome isn't stupid. Ex-soldiers are always, always, always a problem. They know how to kill people, and they know how to fight together. And if they're pissed off, they can use the same skills they used to defeat Carthage to defeat you. And so what the idea very quickly became was, give them free food. Give them free entertainment. This is bread in circuses. Do things that keep them from burning Rome down. Because we can't stop them. They're unemployed ex-soldiers. They know how to burn Rome down. So the rich guys say, look, we'll pay a little tax. We'll take a little bit from Egypt. We'll take a little bit from Sicily. And we'll just give it out for free. That doesn't change the problem, though. And the problem is income inequality. Exactly what we're talking about now. The idea is the rich are getting super rich. They're benefiting from globalization. The poor aren't. The poor are actually losing out from globalization, from competition, from cheaper sources of labor, slaves, and cheaper sources of goods, the empire. So inequality between the rich and the poor becomes huge. There were rich before, and there were poor before. But there was also Cincinnatus. And Cincinnatus is going to be very important. Cincinnatus is a guy in the 300s or so, 400s, 300s, and is before the Roman Empire. He's wealthy. He's not nobody, but he farms his own fields. He's the yeoman farmer. He's the upper middle class farmer. He owns 100 acres. He's successful, but he's not so rich that he's got slaves and servants, and he's a good, successful Roman farmer. And there's an invasion by the Gauls, and the rich guys get freaked out, and they go to Cincinnatus, and they go, Cincinnatus, people respect you. Lead our armies. And Cincinnatus says, sure, no problem. And he gets the army together. He marches out, defeats the Gauls, crushes them in a big battle, comes home. Everyone goes, Cincinnatus, you could lead Rome. You are the greatest man ever. And he says no. And he goes to the Senate, and rather than conquer Rome with his army of plebeian, poor farmers who could run Rome, and he runs it as a dictator, he says no. And like George Washington, in fact, there are statues of George Washington as Cincinnatus in the Smithsonian. He goes to Rome. He goes to the Senate of Rome and turns his sword over and says, I'm going to go back to being a farmer. I don't need power. And he goes back. And he goes back to farming. And Cincinnatus is like this idealized version of Rome as a republic. There are rich guys and there are poor guys, but there's also this vast middle class. And the rich aren't so rich, and the poor aren't so poor. And there's rich people who lived in the neighborhood. And the patricians took care of the poor people with charities and holidays. And there was this connection. You saw the rich walking around, and you saw the poor. And there were these connections between people. Now, in the end of the Roman Republic, you would never run into a rich patrician now. They are either in their palace in Rome, or they are out on their plantation. You are nowhere near these people. They all live together in their isolated communities. They don't hang out with poor people. They have nothing in common with poor people anymore. And that's important because they stop seeing each other. The rich and the poor stop seeing each other as equally Roman. And that's going to matter. So this brings us to understand how this ends up in a series of civil wars and the destruction of the Roman Republic. You have to understand Roman culture, Roman values. And there are 3 Roman values that are incredibly important that will explain what happens next. The first is virtus, virtue, where we get the word virtue. It literally means manliness. It is the things men do that make them men. Virtus, virtus, virtue. It starts with martial courage. Men go to war. It's what men do. A man who doesn't go to war is not a man. But it's also how one acts in public. How one treats their betters, but also their inferiors. Again, we go back to Cincinnatus. It is how you do what you must do because it's the right thing to do, and you do it well. You don't shave corners. You don't lie. You don't do shortcuts. You do what you're supposed to do. There's a word in Greek, it's equivalent to the Greek arete, or it gets combined with the Greek arete. Arete, A-R-E-T-E, means excellence. It's if you do anything, do it well. It's Odysseus and his speeches. It's Achilles and his soldiering. It is Alexander. It's Alexander's entire life. Alexander is living his entire life trying to live up to arete, to do everything well, to be the best at something. So virtue gets tied into this martial courage, public conduct, public behavior, private behavior, and this idea of arete, of doing whatever you do it well. And this is a very important part of especially manliness, of masculinity. 2, for plebeians especially, though it's true for patricians, but for plebeians, this is what they have, is dignitas. D-I-G-N-I-T-A-S. Dignitas, where we get dignity from. Think of Hamilton versus Burr. Think of the old word honor, Shakespeare's honor. And that's dignitas. That's the way people felt about it. So it's more than just dignity, but it's this self-respect, the ability to hold one's head up, to be respected, and to be respectable. You can see how it fits into virtue and virtus. To be respectable, that people respect you because of who you are and what you do. The ability to say, I work hard at my job, and it's honorable, it's a good job. I raise my kids right. I put a roof over my kids' head. I send them to good schools. I work hard at my job. Do other people work harder? Sure. Do other people work less hard? Also, sure. It's the idea that you can respect yourself and what you do, and that other people think well of you. Other people respect you for who you are and what you do. This is the primary value of the plebeians. Why? Because they're farmers. They work hard. If they're soldiers, when they're soldiers, they're the infantrymen. They don't get the glory. They're not the generals. There is no history of them. There are only 2 soldiers in all of Caesar's commentaries about his wars in France, in his conquest of France. He only mentions 2 line soldiers. Now, what the TV show Rome on HBO does is take those 2 soldiers and make the story about them, so that they're a kind of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern of the fall of the Roman Republic. So that they end up being in all these major places, so that the show is able to show you what happens. Caesar and Octavian and Mark Antony. But they're farmers. They know they're going to be forgotten by history. They know they don't have a lot of money. But they have their respect. They have their self-respect, and they have their ability to walk into the bar, into the pub, and they have their name respected. People respect them because of who they are. Their friends, the people around town. Dignitas. It is the number 1 value for plebeians. Whereas auctoritas, where we get authority from, A-U-C-T-O-R-I-T-A-S, auctoritas is the number 1 value for the rich, for the patricians. They have dignity. They can buy dignity. You have to be a drunken, drugged out, crazy ass dude to be a patrician and not get the respect. You see this in Jane Austen books, right? Mr. Darcy has dignitas just because he's Mr. Darcy. He can buy dignitas. He is dignitas. But there are other guys who are liars and cheats and scoundrels. But they have money. And the idea is they have to be so horrible to not have dignity, to not have dignitas from other people. Like, they still have it. Mr. Darcy's like, that's the whole fight between Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy over the officer, whatever his name is. And Elizabeth is like, how could you treat him so badly, Darcy? And Darcy's like, oh my God, he tried to seduce my sister. Like, you don't even know the half of it, girl. And Elizabeth is like, oh, I can't believe that. He looks so good. He looks so honorable. He looks dignified. And Mr. Darcy's like, oh, let me tell you. And there's a whole series of letters that Darcy sends to Elizabeth about how awful that officer is, who will eventually seduce Elizabeth's youngest sister. And she's like, I can't believe this. Like, he has to be terrible to lose her respect. So the rich people have dignitas. What they want is auctoritas, authority, the ability to get others to do what you want. That's not legitimacy. Legitimacy is part of auctoritas. You need legitimacy to help you, but it's a mix of power, of legitimacy, of moral authority, of influence. Remember, the Romans are a hierarchical system. So the people at top have more power than the people below them. But every system, every institution works on this. So the patrician has more auctoritas than the plebeian. But the plebeian man has auctoritas over his children and wife. And the elder brother has auctoritas or wants auctoritas over his younger brothers and sisters. And the wife wants auctoritas, has auctoritas over her children. Roman women cannot control their husbands at all. But they can control their sons. And you see this with over and over again, especially with Lydia and Nero. The idea of there's also Octavian's mom. There's strong women have no power over their husbands in the Roman world. No Roman man, none, could have dignitas and be told what to do by a woman. They might respect their wives, but when the push comes to shove, they could put their foot down and go, I'm the man. I'm in charge of this family. I have auctoritas. But moms have authority over children. Even adult children. And so they will try to use it. And this is one of the things that sends Nero to have a nervous breakdown, because he can't get out of the influence of his mother. His mother wanted to run the empire. And he's like, but I'm a real man. I'm a man. You have to respect me. And she's like, oh, stop. I'll do this job. I'm in charge. And so he tries to have her assassinated a couple of times. And when it doesn't work, he has a nervous breakdown. But auctoritas is the ability to get others to do what you want them to do. It's a mix of power, legitimacy, moral authority, that people follow you. Like people follow you because you're better. It's Cincinnatus. Cincinnatus walks up and goes, follow me, let's go fight Gauls. And people go, of course, Cincinnatus, we'll follow you. You're awesome. It's the way priests are supposed to be. They're supposed to walk into a room and people go, hello, Father. Hey, Father. Just by being a priest, just by having the robe and the collar, was supposed to signify auctoritas, that people respected you. That's one of the problems of the church in the post-child molestation spotlight issues. That, how do I know, why would I give this institution is protecting pedophiles, why would I respect it? There's also influence, and influence is by money, by moral authority, by fame, by action, by reputation. So auctoritas is a whole mix of things, and this is what the rich want. So these are all they're not interchangeable, but plebeians want auctoritas too. They just want it on their own farms, in their own domain. They realize they don't have it in the entire Roman society. Roman patricians want it both against plebeians, but also against each other as well. This is why hierarchy is so important. So here's the thing, and this is important. Remember, let's go back. remember, we have those plebeians who are now out of work, living in Rome, unemployed, on welfare. Guess what they're lacking? They're lacking dignitas. And because they lack dignitas, they can't get virtus. And they don't have auctoritas because no one respects them. They're on welfare. So you know you're online, right? We do this now. We are 2,000 years later, and we do the same damn thing. So the people are online to get their free food, to get their welfare check. And what happens? People walk by, and they say, get a job. Stop living off the taxes of other people. You suck. You're terrible. You're not a person. Stop begging. Get a job. And they're like, but I had one, and it got destroyed by Hannibal. And then I got put out of business by slaves. And I got bought out by bigger competitors. Like, what am I supposed to do? What job is there for me? I can't make horseshoes. I don't know how. I'm a farmer. And so here's the classic struggle, a struggle we still have between the individual and the structure. You can blame the individual for being poor because you don't see the structure that's out there making that person poor, nor do you see necessarily the structure that's helping you, that's improving you. And so there's a lack of dignity. So think about what this is like. You won at Zama. You defeated Carthage. You've won. And now you're unemployed. You're burning through your savings. You live in a shitty apartment in Rome, which is now getting super crowded as more and more poor people, farmers, come into it, but also slaves, also workers. Now you have to compete. All right, well, I lost my land because of destruction and competition, and now I have to compete with British metallurgists, Greek tacticians, Mesopotamian swordsmiths. Like, suddenly I'm in a cosmopolitan world and I don't got the skills to compete. So I can't get a job. So I'm burning through my savings. What does my wife think of me? Is she glad she married me? Is she like, ooh, remember, her life is tied to my income. She used to be a middle-class woman. Now she's not. Now she's poor, living in a shitty apartment in Rome. Looking at her life going like, all right, I guess I'll stand online and get yelled at and have fruit thrown at me so I could get the free food for the kids. Glad I married you. So your wife is likely to be having an affair with somebody who, has a job. Your kids don't respect you because you hang around the house all day getting drunk on Greek wine. We're talking about the old days. Think Al Bundy in Married with Children, in the TV show Married with Children. Right? He's a shoe salesman. That's not a respectable job for a man. At least that's what the show is saying. It's a job. But he doesn't own the store. And it's a job of daily humiliation. And yet he comes home and he talks about high school. I was the most popular guy in my high school class. When I graduated, everybody wanted to date me. Before I had children, I was awesome. And I am now 30 years later and I still remember this. I scored 4 touchdowns in one game. That his glory moment was in high school. 25, 30 years earlier. Well, that's how these Romans felt. So the kids don't respect him, just like the kids don't respect Al Bundy in Married with Children. They're like, yeah, okay, Dad, that was 30 years ago. You suck now. And so you have these guys. They have no dignity. Other people don't like them. They have no authoritas at all. and they can't get Virtus. But they remember beating Hannibal, the greatest general who ever fought Rome. They conquered the Greeks, damn it. They won. They were in Athens. They were in Crete. They were in Ionia. They smashed the Seleucids and their pikes, and their Macedonian pikes. They did have Virtus. They did have Dignitas. And they did have Auctoritas. And that's all been robbed from them. And so they sit and they fume and they blame the world and they blame rich people and they blame foreigners and they blame immigrants and they blame the slaves. And they blame themselves. Does that sound familiar? Yes, it should sound familiar. Because that is exactly what 2016 was talking about. So Rome is culturally in trouble. Isn't there anybody who sees this? Isn't there anybody who knows? And the answer is yes. Yes, and the most famous of them are the Gracchi, Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus. Tiberius is Tiberius. Gaius is his brother, Gaius. Gracchus, Gracchus. The Gracchi, you take out the US and you put I at the end, and it becomes plural. And they're around 125 BC. So they're after the conquest of the Greek world. They're after the conquest of Carthage. And they're looking at this and they go, Rome needs to reform. The people are demanding reform. And what you get is populari. 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 Rich men who played at a crowd, promised a crowd all kinds of stuff to get elected. This is Donald Trump. Donald Trump was not a career politician. He was not a career civil servant. He was a rich guy who was famous, who said, I will fix your problems. And he blamed immigrants, and he blamed globalization, and he blamed minorities for wanting stuff, for wanting rights that would make your rights less important. Donald Trump is a populari. Mussolini and Hitler were populares. Napoleon is a populare. They are people who come along who played at a crowd. They are rich men who go to poor people and say, help me. There's an argument to be made that FDR, Franklin Roosevelt, was a populare. So it's not just fascists or bad people. You know, it's a rich person who plays to the crowd to get elected to power. And the crowd loves it. They love it. They love it. And who does Gracchus blame? Selfish rich people, not like himself. He's a rich guy. Remember, Gracchus is not poor. Gracchus is one of the wealthiest guys in Rome. He's part of that class. He's a senator. Or he's in the Senate class. And he's like, we're going to break up plantations. We're going to go back to small farms. He's attacking the senators. He wants to make Rome great again. He could have used that as his tagline. But he really wants to make Rome great again. Not Donald Trump, who uses it as a logo, and then once he had power, gave it all to the rich. Like, the tax, if you look at, Donald Trump promised a lot of things to white people, especially working class white people, and he hasn't delivered on them. Because once he got elected, he gave in to the rich. The tax breaks are all to the rich. Something like 90% of the tax breaks go to the top 1%, top 5%. The justices who he's getting elected are anti-union, anti abortion, which they might be okay with, but also anti all the stuff that poor people want. They're anti-welfare. They're anti-federal government helping people. They are Donald Trump is putting people in power to play to his class, the top 1%. Gracchus, the two Gracchuses, wanted to help the poor people. They want to take the world back to Cincinnatus, the land of the small farmer. Their argument is Franklin Delano Roosevelt's argument. I can get richer if everybody is richer. It's Kennedy's argument. Kennedy is not quite a populari, but he is a rich guy. And he just doesn't play to the poor people as well to get himself elected. He doesn't. He's a rich guy who's a politician. But Kennedy does the same thing. The rising tide raises all boats. It's okay for me as a rich guy to pay a lot of taxes. If everyone gets richer, I will get richer because I own lots of stuff. And so the idea is to break up plantations, go back to small farms, close the income inequality gap. They also wanted to give more voting rights to non-Roman Italians, especially, and then go out from there, which is less power for conservatives. This is one of those places where they went too far because Romans started to go, whoa, 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 whoa. If the immigrants and the foreigners and the non-Romans get the right to vote, my voting counts less. And so this is one of those places that breaks the liberal Romans from conservative Romans. But this is the things they promise. And so what happens is the Senate murders both of them separately because their careers are separate. Gaius is a younger brother. So Tiberius gets murdered, and then Gaius will come up a couple years later to kind of pick up, kind of like Ted Kennedy picks up the mantle of Bobby Kennedy and of Jack Kennedy. But the Senate doesn't matter. It murders both of them eventually, and there's going to be no reform. Why? Because the Senate, why do they murder him? Why do they murder them? Because the Senate can't be against reform. People want it. People are demanding it. So nobody wants to vote against it. If they vote against it, then they're the guys who screwed all of these poor people. And they're worried the poor people will revolt and burn everything down. They don't want their names on a piece of paper saying, I voted against the poor people. But they don't want to vote for the poor people. They don't want to break up their lands. They don't want to go back to a non-globalized world. They don't want to lose money. They don't want to lose what they have. They want to keep. And so what they do is murder the Gracchi, which does two things. One, it ends the reform right there. It robs the plebeians of their champion and of their leader, and it says a message to all other senators: don't reform. If you reform, something bad is going to happen. And this right here is the beginning of the end, because it meant Rome would not reform constitutionally. So the only reforms that are going to happen have to be extra constitutionally. This is the first time there was violence in the Senate in 400 years. Remember, we talked about the Senate in the beginning, about consensus, of working it out. There is no working out when you go to violence. And so things keep getting worse. The richer get richer. The poor get more pissed off. And into this come the generals, come the populari who want Gloria. So you have this situation, and now we're going to get to the Civil War. You have the unemployment of ex-soldiers, plus welfare equals a lack of dignitas. That welfare sustains them. They don't starve, but they don't get dignity from it either. Now you add to that, you have super rich who want Gloria. Now Gloria is the height of auctoritas. Think Scipio. You get a triumph. You get a parade through Rome. You win a giant war. That's what they want. The super rich. They're surrounded by other people who are super rich. So they're like, hey, I'm super rich. And the other super rich go, yeah, so what? I got a Bugatti. Well, yeah, I got 3 Ferraris. Who cares? The way you made yourself special was Gloria. The way you put yourself ahead of the other super rich was by winning a war. But the Romans had conquered most of the world. So they're not being attacked by anybody. So there's no need to call out the Roman army. Well, super rich guys have a way of getting around this. They have private armies. They can hire their own army. They are so wealthy, they'll hire their own army of 10, 15, 20, 30,000 men. And this is going to lead to dignitas. How? Well, in a conversation. Hi, I am a representative of Senator Claudius. Do I have the right place? I was looking for Sergeant Titus.
Oh, yeah, I'm Sergeant Titus.
Are you drunk, sir?
I'm always drunk.
You're in your underwear on the couch in the middle of the day.
What else am I supposed to do? Hold on, I got Cheetos here. I'm gonna eat my Cheetos. What do you want?
Oh, well, yes. Well, sir, like I said, Senator Claudius, recommended you, had a whole list of people I should go and find, and he recommended you as one of the men who served under him when he was an officer at the Battle of Martinia against the Greeks. Are you that man?
Yeah, I was there. I saved that guy's ass. He gave me $1,000 for that. Didn't buy me anything. Yeah.
Well, yes. Yes, very much. So he wants me to make you an offer. He is putting together, as you may well have known, the British tribes up in Britain are revolting and causing lots of trouble and going, "Urgh!" And we're going to beat up those hillbilly tribesmen way up north. It's probably going to take us about 6 months to get up there. We might have to fight some Gaul tribes along the way, but they shouldn't be too much trouble. We'll get up to Britain. We'll beat them up. He is going to pay. He wants you to be involved. He will pay for you, for your uniform. He will give you a salary of $50,000 a year. He is going to promote you from sergeant to captain as an officer. So you'll get a bonus for whatever we conquer. You'll get a percentage, a percentage of our final tally of whatever we conquer from the British. He will provide weapons, swords, and armor, food, and entertainment. All you have to do is sign on the dotted line.
Well, let me think about. Let me think.
Did you run into my kids outside? Oh yeah, that's how I found you. I was asking for Sergeant Titus, and they said, "Oh, the drunk fat guy upstairs." I was very surprised. I didn't think that would be you, but here you are. Was that your wife flirting with the butcher outside too? She's a lovely woman.
Yeah.
Yeah. How much are you paying? $50,000 altogether. No, per year, plus a bonus of whatever percentage, whatever we get. And remember, you'll now be a captain. You're going to move up in rank. Where do I sign? Right here, sir. Right on the dotted line. Shh. They're going to sign immediately. And what is our drunk, lazy, burned out ex-sergeant living in a shitty apartment, gonna now do? He's gonna call in his wife. He's gonna call in his kids. Who's that, Dad? Who is that? Who's that guy? He's well dressed. He must live in a nice home that doesn't smell like sheep. Well, let me hold on. That was the paymaster of Senator Claudius. Senator Claudius, he's like one of the richest guys around. I heard about him. He's awesome. Yeah. Did you know I saved him back in Greece? Oh, you talk about that all the time. That happened? Really? It really happened? Yeah, could I tell you about how I was in Greece? I know it was before you were born, but I was a man once. Well, now you're a drunk. Yeah, well, I'm a captain now. Wow, honey, you're a captain? Yes. Senator Claudius is putting together an army. He's going up to Britain, which is way far in the north. I haven't been there, but it's way up in the north. I'll be gone a year or two, maybe 3. But he's gonna pay $50,000. $50,000. $50,000. Wow. He's gonna pay $50,000 a year. A year. Wow, Dad. Yeah, $50,000 a year plus a bonus of whatever we capture. We're gonna beat up the Britons. He's gonna show up tomorrow with my uniform. Wow, Dad. Well, honey, I'll miss you, but that's great. Yeah, I think it's great too. And the next day, the uniform arrives, and you put it on. It's a little tight because you put on some weight from back in the day, because you get fat. And you put it in, and all right, and you start the morning, and you do some push-ups, and you do your calisthenics, and the kids are like, Dad, you're awake before noon. Yeah, well, I gotta get ready. Wow, honey, you smiled today. Well, yeah. And then the uniform shows up, and you put it on, and it's tight, and it's got the captain's regalia on the sleeves. Wow, honey, you look dashing. Wow, Dad, you look amazing. You're so much better than the butcher. Shh, shut up. Butcher's just a butcher. Shh. And now your back is straight, and you stand tall, and you go and you find your sword from the closet, and you put it on, and you pull it out. Wow. And you put it back in, and you do a couple marches around your living room, and you go, I'm back, man. I am effing back. And so private armies gave dignitas to these men. Because now the kids, think about what the kids can say. My dad's an officer. What's your dad? My dad's a butcher. Yeah, idiot. My dad is an officer working for Senator Claudius. Wow, that's cool. I wish I could be that. Well, you can't because you're not in the army. My dad is, though. Butcher's boy. And what's the wife going to say? Hey, good looking. Coming back for some more meat? Some more sausage? Yeah, baby. No. I'm here to buy steak, please. And your most expensive cuts. My husband is an officer, a captain for Senator Claudius on his expedition to Britain. Oh, really? Really? He's going to be gone a while. He's going to Britain. So you're sure you don't want a down payment on that pork sausage? We could get you extra long. No. Steak, please. and shut up, or I'll tell my husband that you don't leave me alone. Oh, okay. Yeah, we'll get some porterhouse. We'll get some filet. Yes, miss. Yes, ma'am. Yes, lady. Yes. Okay. We don't need any trouble here. Sorry, I misunderstood our relationship. Yes, I apologize. Please do not say anything to your husband. No, that won't be necessary if I can get the steak at a good price. Oh, yes, of course. So not only is dignitas, given to the man by this private army, but it's given to his children and to his wife. She is now the wife of an officer. They are now the children of an officer. And now what does that private army do? Has a private war. Those fighting up in the British tribes, Rome didn't really care. Rome didn't need to send a full army. Those British tribes are fighting each other. Who cares? Well, who cares is a rich dude who wants gloria, who wants auctoritas. And so he gets his army together and he says to Rome, I will do it. I'll do it for free. Rome will get 20% of whatever we capture. And all the senators think, whoa, that's 20% for nothing. Easy. All right, put it in our pockets. Rome gets rich. And that army goes off, and Senator Claudius goes out. But Senator Claudius goes out, but other senators go out too. They go out to fight the Parthians. They go out to fight Pontus. They go out to fight on the borders of Germania. They start pushing out into these borders. Caesar goes to Gaul. They start pushing to weirder and weirder, farther out places that Rome itself doesn't want to go. Or didn't want to go. It's not the Mediterranean anymore. But you have private armies led by private citizens, and you get private wars because these guys are out for auctoritas and gloria. And what you get in that conversation, in that scene that I gave you, is the destruction of the Roman Republic. Because the loyalty of the soldier, the loyalty of the man, the loyalty of the individual was transferred to the patrician and not to Rome. Why? Because in Britain, they win. They beat up the British tribes. They get some money. So our guy, Titus, has a $50,000 paycheck, and then he gets a bonus for $100,000. And then Claudius comes out and goes, Gentlemen, I have been ordered back to Rome. It seems that a bunch of my enemies, these jerks in the Senate, don't want to pay me proper gloria. They don't respect me, and they don't respect you. Well, I have to ask you, gentlemen, should I go back and give up everything? Or will you come with me to protect what we earned? What say you, men? And the men go, woo, Claudius, Claudius, Claudius. And in that, you have the destruction of Rome. The Roman Republic. The loyalty of the army is now to the person, not to Rome, not to the Republic, which is what it was, even under Scipio. That army is loyal to Scipio, but Scipio is loyal to the Republic. Scipio does not take over. Cincinnatus does not take over. They become private citizens. Cincinnatus goes back to his farm. Scipio goes into the Senate, where he's one of 200. He's maybe the most famous and most important of the 200, kind of like Washington. But he's just one of 200. But now, we have private armies, private wars, and private loyalties. And what we get is 100 years of civil war. Because as Claudius goes back to Rome, somebody else is coming back from Greece or the Caucasus. And Rome is not big enough for two number ones. They both show up, they say, I'm number one. And Rome is not big enough for them. And so what we get is Marius versus Sulla. And Sulla will win and create a terror. He will murder his enemies in the Senate. So that not only did he win the war against Marius and kill Marius, he then went after all the people who were against him, who plotted against him, and starts murdering them, taking their money and giving it to his army, thus buying his army for even longer. Sulla will get old, Sulla will die. The Republic will come back, and then you get Caesar versus Pompey. Caesar wins. And then he's murdered by the Senate, kind of like Tiberius Gracchus. But the army, interestingly enough, whereas the army of Sulla, after Sulla dies, dissipates and goes back to the Republic. It gives back its loyalty. So you have one dictator, but the army kind of goes back. And then you get the rise of Pompey, the rise of Caesar. And what happens is Caesar is so wealthy, so successful, that army stays loyal to him even after he's murdered, even after he's dead. What people's thought was, we will get rid of Caesar, and Caesar's army will become the Republic's army. And that's not what happened. It stayed loyal to Caesar. Caesar's dead. So how does it stay loyal to Caesar? Well, it looks for a successor. And there are two, Octavian and Mark Antony. Now, Octavian is Caesar's heir, his nephew. Caesar didn't have a male child. He had a daughter who was married to Pompey for a while to keep the peace, and that daughter died in childbirth in one of the most, and basically the thing that starts the Civil War is in Julia dying. Because Pompey will eventually marry a woman who is allied to a family against Caesar, and there's all kinds of politics. But basically they become enemies. But at the early part of their career, they're friends. Pompey is the older one. Pompey is the conqueror of Greece or the Levant, the defeater of the Seleucids. He's famous. He ended up in Egypt. He made alliances all over the place. The Roman East is because of Pompey. He was called Pompey the Great, Pompey Magnus. Caesar was younger than him. But Caesar is a young upstart. But they were friends. They got along. And in the end, Pompey became conservative. Pompey became one of the conservatives in the Senate who was like, Caesar's going to ruin everything. If I get rid of Caesar, I can run the Senate. And so the thing that kept them together was Julia. Julia died in childbirth. And that was a momentous moment. Had she not died in childbirth, the two might not have gone to blows. They might have kept the peace. And we wouldn't have Octavian, which might be also true. So it was a momentous death. Poor Julia. So Caesar versus Pompey. Caesar is murdered by the Senate, but the army stays loyal. But the army splits its loyalty between Octavian, 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 who is the nephew, the blood heir of Caesar. But he's young. He's 18. He's a kid. He's never generaled before in his life. And Mark Antony, Caesar's most important lieutenant, his right-hand man, his colonel. Why would the army give loyalty to Mark Antony? Because armies are conservative. Notice we keep using the word conservative, but if I am going to fight, if I am going to get into a battle, who do I want to lead me into that battle? Remember, in a battle, I might get killed. So who do I want to lead? Do I want an 18-year-old kid who happens to be the nephew of Caesar? Or do I want Caesar's right-hand man, the winner of 8 different battles? A man who has been there since the beginning. And the answer is, some will go with Octavian, family loyalty, and some will go to Mark Antony. It makes sense. And people in the army has these debates. Men in the army are like, where are you going? Oh, I'm going to go with Mark Antony. And they're like, why? Octavian's the nephew. He's the heir apparent. And they're like, yeah, but he's 18. If we ever get into a fight, he's going to get us killed. He doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. I'm like, well, yeah, that's true. But he is Caesar's heir. Like, blood still matters. But in the army, not getting dead is more important. And so the army split between those two. And in the end, Octavian and Mark Antony will have it out. Caesar's army will fight each other. And they will fight in Greece. They will actually have a naval battle in Greece. And Octavian will win and be the last man standing. Mark Antony will commit suicide. Cleopatra will have to commit suicide, and she's a fascinating story, and I want to take a moment to talk about her. But in the end, after 100 years of civil war, Rome is exhausted. The army, there's only one army standing. There's only one populare standing. The Senate has been butchered, and the one person left standing is Octavian. He has complete control of the army. He is in control of all the levers of power. The Senate wants nothing to do with arguments against him. He walks into the Senate and everyone's like, whoa, you do what you want. We don't want to fight. We don't want to be murdered like Sulla. We don't want to be murdered like Mark Antony did. We're cool with you. And Octavian says, great, because I was going to leave you guys all in charge. I'm going to leave you the way you are. And the Senate goes, great, we're cool. And the result is the Roman Empire. And in our next lecture, we're going to talk about the Roman Empire. Though we might have a side lecture about Cleopatra, because it'll be short, but it'll be cool. But in our next major lecture, we'll have the Roman Empire and the reforms. All right, thank you.